caregiving careers. Caregiving is thought of so seriously that the literature terms it your career. Okay? So not only is a third of caregivers going to be exposed to at least an episode of depression, of that half of them will become stuck in that chronic sort of depression that then they'll need to go into therapy for, and so on and so forth. Okay? Now, depression is highly correlated to burden. Okay, caregiver burden is something I'll talk about in a little bit. Okay, but why do we worry about depression? Depression tends to predict institutionalization of the older person. Now, institutionalization in itself, putting someone in an older in a home for the elderly or that sort of thing in itself is not a bad thing. And in fact, it's a very useful resource for a lot of people because that's where the caring gets done, the day-to-day activities get done. But unfortunately, institutionalization has been linked to some extent to increased mortality and increased decline as well. Yeah. Okay. The other thing about depression is that it's linked to the kind of relationship you have with the patient before they got sick. So if you had a better relationship, if relationship satisfaction was higher before the dementia diagnosis, it's more likely that you are protected from the depression. Okay, so everybody go home and be really nice to your children. This depression, it does really bad things to us because it increases the bad things and it decreases the good things. So it increases things like our sense of burden. So the more depressed we are, the more burdened we feel, which makes us even more depressed. Okay? It increases our physical health problems, and again, it increases our mortality rate. Okay? On the other hand, it decreases all the things that we want to have. So it decreases our perceived ability to cope, how well we think we are going to be able to cope with this situation. It decreases family functioning, which is also really unfortunate because how cohesive a family is together, how well they solve problems together, is actually a very nice protective factor in terms of protecting you against all these bad things also. And also it decreases our satisfaction in caregiving as well. So you can see that it all becomes rather cyclical. Okay, so I promised I'll talk about burden, right? So what is burden? Caregiving burden is spoken about as a specific type of stress for caregivers. Right? It's the physical, emotional, social, and financial problems that a caregiver experiences. Now, when you look at the literature, there are actually two types of stresses that they talk about. They talk about the objective burdens, okay, which are the things that you can measure. How many times a day do you need to help this person to go to the bathroom? How many hours do you need to spend with this person? How much effort do you need to expend in helping this person? Very measurable and very objective, right? But I mean, all that is well and good, but what about how I feel? I'm the person, I'm the caregiver, it's how I feel that matters. So that's why they refer to subjective burden, and that's how I assess my burden. So compared to my neighbor, I may be doing less than him, but if it's a bigger drain on me, then I see that as a bigger burden, and that's where all the problems come in. Okay? Again, burden is an important predictor of institutionalization because it's so closely related to depression as well. And another issue with burden is that when someone is extremely burdened, they tend to have a lower assistance-seeking behavior. Okay, so they're less likely to come forward and tell you, I need help because I'm feeling burdened. A bit ironic, right? So again, for those of us who are practitioners or who have that frontline sort of roles in our jobs, I think that's a very important point to note. Okay, so the burden, however, can be mediated by certain things. Okay, it can be mediated by how much money you have. So if you're more well off, you probably have other resources at your disposal. Okay, how much social support you have. Once again, for the ladies, the females tend to perceive higher burden than men. Okay, your own personal factors like your coping styles and your personality. All right, and the relationship again with your care recipient. Now, the thing about dementia care is that it comes with its own unique set of grief issues, okay, that often goes unrecognized and it's not given a status. Often with dementia patients, there's a gradual series of losses in terms of the loss of personal identity, the loss of the memories together and that sort of thing, the repeated losses in terms of the companionship, okay, the shared goals that you might once have had, the mutual support, okay. My parent once was always, caring for me and doing things for me. Now I'm lacking that. And the long-standing roles that you've had together. Okay, so that's a lot of different factors and a lot of different things, right? The people who are way cleverer than me have gone and did research and put all of these things together in what they call the stress process model. Okay, so basically let's not look at this because it'll give us a headache. I've got a situation that I shall talk through. Okay, this person, it's a fictitious person, but I've named it after my best friend. It's nothing to do with her. Okay. So Ashley is a 50-year-old lawyer, and she's married with two children, okay, school-aged children, and she's the only daughter to her mother. Her mother is widowed at this time, so Ashley has taken on most of the caregiving roles. Now, so, when Ashley's mother was diagnosed, and as her behaviors were beginning to get worse, she came to live with Ashley, and suddenly Ashley's entire role, the whole gamut of things that she had to do suddenly grew overnight. Okay, she had to first deal with the primary stresses of the situation, and when we talk about primary stresses, they are the things that are related to the caregiving situation with the care recipient. So having to deal with the mother's challenging behaviors, having to deal with the mother's depressed moods, as well as having to help her with all those little activities of daily living. Those were the primary stresses that Ashley was faced with. Okay. Next, that led to the secondary stresses that Ashley had. Okay. From the primary stresses, she now had not only extra workload, she had no time for her children. She's a lawyer at work, no time to deal with clients. Every bit during the day, every hour or so, her domestic helper calls and says, "Ma'am, you know, Grandma is doing such and such. Can you come home?" And so she has to run home. Okay, so she's got that sort of role strain, role conflict, and her boss wasn't happy as well. Yeah, so in certain cases, you can imagine that the person, the caregiver, might have to scale back on their work hours and that sort of thing, which further adds another layer of economic strain as well. Okay, so with all this, Ashley never had time. Who has the time to go out and be friends with your friends, right? Who has time to go and seek social support or seek out community support? Unfortunately, Ashley also as a person had very poor coping skills. She tended to be very emotion focused in her coping style. So every time something went wrong, she yelled at her husband or yelled at the kids, and that was the extent of her coping. Okay, but she never really took a problem-centric, problem-solving approach to her problems. Okay, so you can see that the mediators that tend to work in these situations were not available to Ashley. Alright, so all these happened at the same time, happened together. She got really tired. She started to feel really incompetent, really lousy as a mother, really lousy as a daughter, and just never really found any meaning in her caregiving roles. And that finally led to the intrapsychic sort of factors, which are the things that happen inside you, to put it loosely. Right? And that led to Ashley's own depression and her sense of perceived burden, as well as her anxiety. Okay, poor Ashley. Okay, so that's basically how all these areas come together and really stuff up things for us. Okay, but you know, it all sounds so horrible, but it's not all bad news. Okay, really, it's really quite wonderful, because if you surveyed people, they did a survey as such, and 73% of the people surveyed actually found something positive to say about their caregiving experiences. Okay, so these might include things like, I've learned something, it's a sense of mastery. I've learned something that I didn't know I could ever do. It's a sense of gratitude to be able to do something for someone who's taken care of you your whole lives. Okay, it's a sense of fulfilling your duties. And it gives you a sense of importance, self-efficacy, as well as a sense of fulfillment. And the good thing about the positives is that it tends to protect this person, the care recipient, from ending up in an institution as well. Okay? And social support is an important resource in terms of rising up and enhancing the positives. Okay, so now all that news. Let's skip through that. I had a positive example as well. Let's skip through that as well. I was going to talk about burnout in paid caregivers. I don't have much time, but if anyone really needs to know, you can come and ask me at the end. So that gives me some time to quite mainly talk about my own research. Okay, so I've got this interest in caregivers, right? What I had done was I was really interested to find out what the caregiver's perspective was when they came to the decision to put their parent, brother, sister in a home. Okay, and I wanted to understand the decision that they made, all right? The cultural influences in Singapore, right? As well as the outcomes thereafter. So under the auspices of Dr. Fisher, alright, this is the current research that I'm doing. I think that the caregiver in Asia is going to be quite different from the general caregiving literature that we read. Okay, certainly there's a lot of literature that's come out of similar societies to ours, like Korea, South Korea, Japan, societies that are both similarly patriarchal, societies that are very Confucian in their outlooks, okay, and also modern, similar, okay. But the literature also tells us that no matter where you're from, the East or the West or whatever, the placement decision is always a very difficult one. Okay, it doesn't matter where you're from. Alright. So what I was interested in is not just the cultural influences, but I was interested in the modern cultural influences. Now you can recognize that our lives, the infrastructure of our lives has changed dramatically over the last 2-3 decades or so. We don't live in that sort of communal setting where we can provide care for one another and all that. Okay, so those were some of the things in the back of my mind, and some of the countries that I was mirroring ourselves with, like Japan and Korea and all that, even they had moved towards being more open to institutionalization, the use of community care. Okay? So what I really wanted to find out was how are families involved once the placement decision is made, and whether the difficulty of that placement decision had any impact on how they were involved. The other part of that was that a lot of research has been done on the front end. How is the decision made? Is the decision difficult and all that? But no one has really looked at what happens in terms of family involvement after that. Of course, in the media now, we hear a lot about people who are left in homes, who are left in hospitals, and nobody ever comes to claim them or visit them or anything thereafter, right? So it was a bit of odds to me, because on the one hand, we are Confucian and we're very family-centric, but on the other hand, this was still happening. Okay, so I'm hoping that in a care situation in a home where everything is provided for them, so food and medical care and the ADL sort of stuff is provided, what is it that we can do? What is the little thing we can do to improve the quality of life of these residents? And the idea struck me that family involvement might be the key to improving quality of life. Okay, so I'm in the middle of my research, so I'll let you guys know how that turns out. Or you can get the journal once it's published. So I'm just at the stage of thinking about doing my analysis. So these are some very vague initial indicators. Okay? Why families want to be involved? The families that have come forward are telling me, yes, we want to be involved in our parents' lives, in our brothers' lives. Why do they want to be involved? Because of this sense of duty, the sense of kinship. Okay, and the sense of gratitude, again, as I mentioned earlier, not just gratitude of what I've received from you, but the gratitude for this opportunity to be able to do something for you while I can. Okay? And people continue to play roles despite the transition into managed care. Right? So you can think that you can actually technically wash your hands off and this person will still be okay, but people continue to be involved and they develop new roles as well. So things like providing physical care where perhaps nursing care ends and then there's a bit of a gap, right? There's nothing else there. So people tend to step up and do that. Okay, doing the advocacy bit, so speaking up to your doctors, speaking up to the nurses for your patient. It can be difficult for the nurses and all, but someone has to do it. Okay, and providing emotional support, maintaining that sense of self, especially where some of the participants that I've spoken to and their family member, their care recipient were also diagnosed with dementia. Often you find that the family puts in a lot of effort to maintain that thread of continuity, to maintain that sense of self. So bringing in things, this was her favorite food, I'll bring it for her. This is the way she liked to be styled, this is how she liked her hair combed. I'll do it for her, I'll talk to her, I'll bring in her old photos, I'll talk to her about the old stories and all that. That sense of wanting to do that maintenance in the sense of self. And so basically then what, right? So now what I hope to do is to be able, if I can identify what it is that makes a difference in these lives, what it is that encourages people to stay involved. The literature tells us that nursing support from the staff in the home keeps people, makes people want to be involved. So I think that's something that we might head towards. Okay, so I've spoken a lot this evening. If you've forgotten everything else, never mind. It's just the takeaway message is that the caregiving role is a difficult role, but it's nonetheless crucial and it's a very meaningful role. helping caregivers can stave off bigger problems. So in terms of providing them with social support, the information that they need. Okay? Recognizing needs and increasing support leads to better family coping as well as family involvement from there. Thank you.
Very much to Rajini, who I think provided a useful summary of kind of many of the difficult issues for carers, but also I think it's useful, I think it fits in with your personality that you kind of remember the positive aspects of caring, which I think are very important, and you're quite right, there's a lot of meaning that people get from caring, so that's very useful, thanks. We're going to hand over to Joy. So Joy is going to move the conversation on a little bit. She's going to talk about psychosocial interventions for people with dementia. So I guess it's going to be about some of the things that people who are struggling in their caring role, whether they be professionals or family carers, some practical ideas, some things they might want to use, and hopefully you're going to ground that in some theoretical ideas. So maybe I'll hand over to Joy.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for spending your precious Wednesday evening here. I have a tendency to rattle on a lot because I'm used to doing 4-hour lectures. So, Donna, would you be so kind? Do you have a watch? Tell me when 20 minutes is up. Okay. Instead of giving everybody a comprehensive review of all the psychosocial interventions that are available for people with dementia, I find that quite impossible to do in 20 minutes. I've decided really to concentrate mainly on the principles that guide us clinicians, hopefully in choosing the kind of interventions or in picking the interventions when we work with people with dementia, which is not moving. Okay. The person-centered care approach. What is person-centered care approach? It's actually not as daunting as it sounds, and I think a lot of people in the audience who work with people with dementia are very familiar with the concept. It is basically both a philosophical approach and a practical component of patient care, or client care, people with dementia. It's basically founded on an ethics that all human beings are of absolute value and worthy of respect regardless of their disability. Okay? It is a care that's centered on the whole person. Okay? Not on just the disease part of the brain, not merely just on the fact that they have dementia. We focus, and we like to focus on the remaining abilities, on the emotions that they have, on the cognitive abilities, rather than thinking about the losses. Okay, the losses do accumulate. If we think about the losses, the more we work with them, the more losses they will be experiencing, and it's pretty distressing if you think about it that way. We want to think about care that treats the person within the context of family. We take into consideration their culture, we take into consideration their ethnicity, the gender, the personality. It's a care that seeks to maintain the personhood of that person with dementia. It basically is guarded by elements like, well, in this case, I named it the 4 key elements, or I don't, but somebody did. Valuing people with dementia, okay, and absolute positive regard for them. To treat each and every one of them with value, instead of thinking that, oh, this is a person with dementia, he is less of the person. He is not less of a person, he is still a person. Okay, so we value the person with dementia, we treat them as individuals. Individuals with their own likes, dislikes, with their own needs, with their own unique personality. Okay, and person-centered care also emphasizes looking at the world from the perspective of the person with dementia, to see things from the eye of the person with dementia. Okay, and to experience the kind of feelings they are going through, to experience the kind of emotion that they may be experiencing being in that situation. It also emphasizes the element of creating a positive social environment, basically positive relationships that emphasize on the well-being of the person living with dementia. Okay? Without the practice of person-centered care, we look at the person with dementia, concentrating on the disease itself, concentrating on the deficit, concentrating on the disability. But with the practice of person-centered care, we look first at the person who just so happened to have dementia. The person with his or her own unique needs, with his or her own unique likes, dislikes, preferences, personality. Okay. Who happen to have dementia? And like all people, like all of us, they have psychological needs that are universal. They have the needs of inclusion, the need to feel and be involved, okay, the need to be engaged, the need of occupation, to feel that they are of value, to feel that they can be useful, they can be helpful, the need of identity, of being his or her own self, with their own uniqueness about themselves, the need of comfort, okay, to be close to something, somewhere, some being, okay, the need for this closeness, and the need for attachment, the need to belong to somebody. These unique needs, or these needs that we all have, okay, a person with dementia has them as well. And this is basically, or these are basically the needs that we look at, or the principle that I work with, that guided me in choosing the kind of psychological, psychosocial interventions for people with dementia. It is really not rocket science, okay? Whatever we do, whatever we choose, whatever we pick, we think about what needs is it addressing, or what needs are not being addressed. Now, I could end my talk here and everybody would feel a tad cheated the fact that I haven't talked about a single intervention, so I will now. So when mental and physical capacities are failing, the practice of person-centered care makes it possible for a person in dementia to be in a state of well-being when the psychological needs, the physical needs are both met and valued. Now, the tool that I picked to speak a little bit more on is Reminiscence therapy. It's a tool that most of you who are working with older adults are very familiar with, and just indulge me, I'll go through some of it. Might be a bit easy for you, you might have known the knowledge before, but some of you might find it quite interesting. Now, what is Reminiscence therapy? It basically involves recollecting, sharing of memories from the past, using trigger objects or photos. It is not just undirected conversation, not just undirected conversation in terms of, oh, picking up an old object and say, oh, what's this? Or what can you remember about this? Oh, you know, it's not just undirected conversation, but rather it's an exchange of the memories. It's an exchange of their experiences, a sharing of what they went through, of their memories. And this exchange of experience, or this exchange of memories, can be between the old and the young, can be between family and friends, okay? Can be between carers and professional staff, involving the person with dementia, okay? It can be individual as well, if we have the resources. So if a carer at home, it's perfectly fine for a carer at home to be doing Reminiscence therapy. But we do that quite a bit in a group setting, okay? It can be done involving the person with dementia with the family members. It can be done involving the person with dementia and their carer. It can be done with the person with dementia and younger volunteers. Okay? It can be conducted at home, it can be conducted at day centers, it can be conducted at nursing homes. Triggers. Okay, like I said, these are just triggers. They're not just a test of memory. Don't bring that bit up and say, what's that? You mean you don't know that's an iron? Have you not seen that before? That's not the purpose of this exercise. That's not the purpose of displaying these triggers. They are triggers. It's kind of like putting them in the mood, transporting back their memories or their state of mind back to when all these things were still present. I have kind of picked some kind of structure, because like I said, it's not just undirected conversation. It's not like, oh, having a chit chat about what these things are, what are they used for, how are they used. But I like to adopt this little structure, which was the protocol used in a very big study conducted in Europe, where they did this Reminiscence therapy groups across Europe. And what you tend to do when you are starting a group session, you pick a theme. For example, I picked the theme, my neighborhood, okay? And I have triggers. I realized the triggers are not exactly very appropriate for older adults because they are my triggers. When we were young, we played 4 stones. Do you still remember playing 4 stones or 5 stones if you're very good? Yeah? Oh, you're too young for that, is it? Okay. Our age, we play 4 stones. We play 0 point, You know what 0 points are? We use rubber bands, we do ropes, and we do 0 point, and I'm terrible at that. But that is a really good trigger for me when I see all that. That really brings me back. Marbles, tops, marbles are golly, I still remember. We have triggers there, we lay them out. I apologize, I wasn't able to borrow any from the hospital. They are quite precious. Therefore, we all have this habit. All our clinicians start to become like Karaguni men, going, knocking on the door, collecting all the antique stuff, because they are really good triggers. Once we have triggers, we lay them out. You know, triggers can also be in other medium other than objects. They can be pictures. They can be scent. You know. Things like scent of cloves, scent of cloves. So basically herbs and stuff like that, where you trigger, you know, the kind of memory. If your theme was food, for example, then you might want triggers to be more involving the smell, sense. Okay, so I just want to note that triggers need not necessarily be physical objects. It could be pictures, it could be smell, it could even be song. Once we've got the trigger, the starters, the warm-up is almost like an icebreaker. Okay, the kok me, that's before my time, so some of you may know, that's the sound when you hear that man going kok, 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 to be selling noodles along the street. The tong tong man is my time, you know, when they go tong tong tong, and I know that's the tong tong man selling the sweet downstairs. So you could have like a little activity where they all sit around and say, oh, what's that sound? Oh, that sounds like this and that and this and that. And then you could have an activity for the day that follows on from the theme. So an activity could be like discussing street games. We did that once in a group, and we have a whale of a time. And this is with younger people and older adults. And you'll find that with this activity, that we were able to share and exchange memories of what they did, what they used to do. And it's actually a very, very enjoyable exercise. Oh,